Mrs. Chair, I think we should really take some repercussion for our colleague, because there's no justification to the killing of children. And that's what our colleague has just said. I want that, according to our internal rulings, our colleague is sanctioned for justifying the killing of children. There's no justification to the killing of children. And this cannot be allowed in this room. Please, Chair, do not allow this in this room.
Point of order, the kafaya is not a political statement. Is it against the rules of this House to have a Ukrainian flag or a pin on our lapels? Would somebody call on us to remove that? People are more annoyed about symbols than they are about starving babies.
The pretext of self-defense has crumbled. The US, NATO and the US bear heavy responsibility for Israel's crimes, the genocide. When kids are being killed, you remain silent. And behind the silent, you have all this profit linked to bloodshed.
Genocide, ethnic cleansing, annexation, war crimes. These are the actions currently inflicted upon the Palestinian people by the Israeli far-right government. The goal of Netanyahu's criminal regime is clear: to completely destroy Gaza so that the Palestinian population is forced to leave. These are actually the words even coming from the minister Smotrich. I find no better summary than what Yair Golan, the leader of my sister party, the Democrats in Israel, recently said. A sane country doesn't engage in fighting civilians, doesn't kill babies as a hobby, and doesn't set as its goal the expulsion of an entire population. Colleagues, silence in the face of such crimes is complicity. The EU is already on the wrong side of history. The question is, are we going to continue down this dangerous path? Yesterday's decision in the Council was a disgrace. Are you serious about evaluating the agreement with the association agreement with Israel? The time for the evaluation is long overdue. What we need to do is immediately suspend the trade agreement, allow humanitarian aid to flow into Gaza ASAP, impose sanctions on the entire Netanyahu government, not single ministers, implement an EU-wide weapon embargo, and right now, 14,000 children are at risk of starving to death within the next 24 hours. The atrocities against Palestinians are among the worst since the Second World War. The EU must act swiftly and decisively.
Thank you very much.
Free Palestine.
To erase Gaza off the face of the earth. In Gaza, there are 2 million Nazis. The army has to be vindictive and cruel. Drop an atomic bomb on the strip. Ladies and gentlemen, these aren't sentences uttered by isolated fanatics. These are statements made by members of the Netanyahu government. They are the ideological underpinning that proves and shows what is happening in Gaza. How can anyone be surprised that the world is starting to call what is happening in Gaza a genocide? How is it possible? How is it possible to remain silent? How can we remain silent given the extermination and what is being broadcast live from Gaza every day? How can it be that President von der Leyen hasn't condemned these events? Our answer to the Russian invasion was forceful, quick, and exemplary. And what about now? What value does international law have when we only apply it when it suits us? Do we want the EU to go down in history as an entity that made the same mistakes that the international community made in Rwanda and Srebrenica? Yesterday, the EU decided to review its association agreement with Israel, but it took a long time to get to that decision. The Spanish Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, and then Tisoc Leo Varadkar wrote a letter to her on the 14th of February 2024 asking for an urgent review, but they got no answer. Did 53,000 people have to die to take this decision? Did we have to wait 14 months to take this decision? Yesterday, the United Nations warned that 14,000 babies might die in the next 48 hours if they don't get humanitarian aid, and half the time has gone by. So maybe half the amount of these children has died. Let us stop with euphemisms. Let us speak out clearly. Let us act forcefully and decisively. The review is not enough. We have to suspend the association agreement. We have to impose an arms embargo. We have to stop trade with the illegal settlements. We have to condemn, but we're not condemning the people of Israel. On the contrary, we're shouting out to defend the people of Israel, because the people of Israel are not Netanyahu. There are very brave voices speaking out against Netanyahu, such as Yair Golan, the leader of the Democrats, that said that Israel is on the path to becoming a pariah state like South Africa. And he also said that a sane country does not kill babies for a hobby. And it is with leaders like Yair Golan, with an Israel that doesn't remain silent, that does defend human rights, with an Israel that wants the release of hostages, that we have to build a long-lasting and sustainable peace that recognizes two states, Israel and Palestine. I'm almost done, ladies and gentlemen. José Mujica, who recently died, uttered important words I would like to hear echoed here in this chamber. Power does not change people. It only reveals who they really are. That is why we have to act, because if we have politics without humanity, what we're showing isn't leadership but indifference. And the EU cannot remain indifferent. It cannot remain silent. As a European, I don't want to feel ashamed for being on the wrong side of history. Thank you. Commissioner, finally, you admit the need to review the association agreement with Israel. This is a victory because people rallied together and put pressure on the EU, but we had to wait for a year and a half of constant bombing, of famine being used as a weapon of war, thousands of millions of children dead, and there's genocide in Gaza. I'm repeating this here because some people in the chamber don't want to admit it. It is genocide, and we must call it out. 14,000 babies, Palestinian babies, might die in the next 48 hours. What other name can you give to that? And that will happen if humanitarian aid isn't given. And you, European leaders, you in the European Commission, you're still dilly-dallying, wondering whether you can use the word genocide, thinking of investigating and inquiring and looking at whether Israel is breaching the law or not. And you wouldn't arrest Netanyahu if he came here. And you don't want to impose an arms embargo. Commissioner, I hold a lot of respect for you, but we have the commissioner responsible for culture to talk about Gaza. Why such disdain? Did President von der Leyen not have time? Or maybe she was busy shaking the hand of Netanyahu. You didn't hesitate. You didn't miss a beat to adopt sanctions against Russia. But do Palestinian lives have no value? What are you waiting for God's sake, in order to adopt sanctions against Netanyahu? Are you waiting for not a single Palestinian to be alive? Words are not enough. We must act. History will judge you, because if Gaza is wiped off the map, it will be too late to act. We strongly condemn the atrocities perpetrated by the Israeli occupying state in Gaza. It has murdered more than 53,000 Palestinians, most of them women and children. More than 2 million Palestinians face famine, while an additional 100,000 have been displaced over the last few days. 120,000 wounded people, babies, children, elderly, are being pushed towards death because the occupier has destroyed the healthcare system. The pretext of self-defense has crumbled. The US, NATO, and the US bear heavy responsibility for Israel's crimes, the genocide, the displacement of the people of Gaza, the settlements, undermining the need of setting up an independent Palestinian state. Bolstering economic, political, and military relations with Israel as a partner puts wind in the sails of its criminal policy. Open up corridors for emergency humanitarian aid. Drastically increase funds for the Palestinian people. Back and boost UNRWA's work. Get the Gaza hospitals up and running again. We must all take to the streets to back the struggle to end the massacre of the Palestinian people, for a free homeland for the Palestinians.
Thank you, Chair. And I stand here today to do what EU leaders won't do, and that is to apologise to the people of Gaza and Palestine. I'm sorry that it has taken tens of thousands of deaths and the imminent death of 14,000 starving babies just so that the European Commission can agree to review an association agreement that should have been suspended years ago. I'm sorry that the EU countries continue to send the bombs and weapons that shred your children to pieces, and that there's no accountability for their complicity in your mass murder. I'm sorry that over a year after the ICJ ruled that there was a credible risk of genocide against your people, EU leaders have failed to agree a single sanction against Israel. I'm sorry that EU leaders have refused to enforce the ICC arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, the war criminals responsible for the genocide against you. I'm sorry that you are starving while a few kilometres away Zionists dine in the finest restaurants. To the children of Gaza, I am sorry that the EU's complicity and the moral cowardice of our leaders have resulted in your childhoods being stolen, your bodies being starved and broken, and your brutal murder. I want you to know that the public stand with you. We stand with you against the complicity of our leaders. Outside these institutions, people are making it clear they will never accept the normalisation of genocide or the violation of international law. We have not abandoned you. Never again means never again for anyone.
At the moment in Gaza, there is ethnic cleansing. The UN is talking about 14,000 babies that might die of hunger over the next few hours. We cannot remain silent. It cannot be allowed. Yesterday's decision to review the association agreement between the EU and Israel is welcome. Some countries, including Greece, unfortunately didn't support this decision, and that is actually an insult to the Greek people. What is happening in Gaza at the moment does not contribute to a safer Israel. We demand the restarting of a constant flow of humanitarian aid to Gaza, an end to the military operations, the release of hostages, and restarting talks on the basis of the two-state solution according to the UN Security Council resolutions.
Thank you. Colleagues, nothing, and I mean nothing, justifies the human suffering in Gaza. The starvation, the killings, the genocide. No one should be able to turn away from that. Yet, that was exactly what has been going on. In the world, in Europe, in this House, the majority stood by while the situation in Palestine got worse and worse and worse. Meanwhile, some of us insist, and some of us have been demanding from the EU to act for years now. Today, I can finally say our pressure was not for completely nothing. So, okay, the EU will review its association agreement with Israel. In my opinion, there is nothing to review. Israel is in clear violation of Article 2, so the only thing to do is to suspend the agreement. However, the intention at least is a good political signal, a signal that will sadly have no impact on the people in Gaza. We have to act, not to review documents, not to raise concerns. We have to be clear and tell the Israeli government end this madness or face sanctions. It is the bare minimum, because the never again is now.
In front of our eyes, a heinous international crime is being carried out, the genocide of the Palestinian people. 53,000 Palestinians have already been slaughtered to build the Riviera that Trump was talking about. The EU is remaining silent. You are complicit. When civilians die, you remain silent. When kids are being killed, you remain silent. And behind the silent, you have all this profit linked to bloodshed. Mr. Mitsotakis from the EPP doesn't want to defend international law, international humanitarian law. He pretends to be an honest broker and to be a broker between the murderers and the victims, but he carries out military exercises, business and diplomatic relations with Israel. Greece was the victim of Nazism and will not remain silent. We demonstrate, we stand up against Netanyahu, the criminal, and his henchmen. Stop the genocide and stop relations with Israel, the murderous country. Freedom to Palestine.
Why is the Union so silent and passive? This is a genocide. This is an emergency. The killing of thousands of people like us, Palestinian people, including children. The halting of humanitarian aid to these people, these are atrocities, criminal atrocities. I condemn the declarations of the Israeli government and I welcome the developments within the Council, but we have to take more action. We have to be strong. There is no peace without justice. Thank you.
Today, the Europe of principles and values looks on the genocide indifferently. The genocide of the Palestinian people perpetrated by a war criminal, Benjamin Netanyahu, and the far right and the right are trying to rewrite history that all began 2 years ago. But know that we have occupying troops in Palestine. We don't have displaced people in Palestine. And of course, I'm talking about a genocide. It is a crime against humanity. The fact that European leaders and Mrs. von der Leyen aren't speaking is disgraceful. They are complicit in this. The European Parliament at this 11th hour can save the dignity of Europe and the lives of thousands of children. Suspend the EU-Israel Association Agreement. We need an arms embargo, a ceasefire, a viable political settlement. We need to go back to the 1967 borders, and of course, it's obvious we need this arms embargo. We can say it loud and clear. Palestine has a voice and has the right to exist. Freedom to Palestine.
Madam President, Commissioner and colleagues, Prime Minister Netanyahu said that he is engaged in a war of civilization over barbarism. But the civilized world has concluded that it is the IDF that are conducting a campaign of barbarism. A majority of European countries have finally concluded that it is barbaric to use starvation as a weapon of war, that it is barbaric that Minister Smotrich is determined to, I quote, cleanse Gaza, that Gideon's chariot is a barbaric and brazen rejection of international humanitarian law. But we cannot just focus on access for aid. We also have to make sure that violence has to come to an end. What hostage has ever been released as a result of a military action? And today we read that the IDF fired warning shots at French and other diplomats visiting the West Bank. If this is the way European diplomats are treated, imagine how Palestinians are treated in the West Bank. And it is unavoidable to conclude that it is the IDF that are conducting a barbaric campaign. Thank you.
Il y a 77 ans,
77 years ago, my family experienced Nakba, thousands of people massacred, 800,000 Palestinians expelled, and many of the Palestinians now are the children of these people. So it's another Nakba. And when we talk about the annexation of Gaza, 14,000 babies could die because of the humanitarian aid blockade. What should we be debate this evening? The 100,000 tons of bombs dropped on the people, 60,000 people dead and 120,000 injured, the 90% of schools and hospitals targeted deliberately, the 221 killed journalists. What kind of discussion can we have in the EU when the leaders are accomplices? I would like to tell you, for those who condone genocide, we're not interested in what you have to say. You are what you do. It's only that your acts that count. Now, a surgeon in Palestine said that the only answer is civil disobedience. Thank you. In Gaza, it's easier to die than to survive, but sometimes it's better to die. These were the words of a Gaza refugee. we mustn't have empty words. What else has to happen to sanction Israel, to suspend the agreement with them and have an arms embargo? I went to Rafah in an area that actually finds it difficult to get medicine and food across. It's 40 degrees and there isn't a drop of water. 14,000 babies might die of hunger over the next 2 days. Hospitals are destroyed, and the Israeli government is openly saying they want to exterminate the Palestinian people, to distribute. They only want to distribute aid in certain areas. There's famine, deportations, genocide. Why is Europe not saying this? The European Parliament and the European Commission are just standing by, and we are not doing anything. Your silence is making you an accomplice now and in the history books.